Welcome to Andy's Chomping at the Bit. Welcome to Andy's Chomping at the Bit, presented by Big Andy Media, the official sponsor of Andy's Chomping at the Bit, and the creator of the new Andy's Chomping at the Bit theme music. So today's episode is Stigmas, Stereotypes, and Generalizations. And I had a hard time with this one because, well, I wanted to do just stigmas, but it's only fair if I cover all three of these at once because they're all so closely tied, and the issue with them is, for the most part, the same. So when we make generalizations, and as far as grouping a bunch of people together on a single issue and passing judgment, or making an assumption, I should say, on that issue, it creates an unfair, I know life's not always fair, but it creates an unrealistic picture for other people that fit into that category. Classic example would be, let's go with addiction, because that's one I'm really, really familiar with. Most people who have a negative image of addicts, even recovering addicts, it usually stems from trauma or a bad experience with either an actively using addict or an addict in recovery that really hasn't put in the work to change themselves, or they're just bad people. That's the thing. It's you can't categorize everyone as a good or a bad for those things. I can use this on just about any group of people, as far as that faces, even groups that face discrimination. Like, you can go with the LGBTQ community, right? So someone can ask me, well, do you like people in that community? And my answer is simply, it depends on the person. It goes with black people, goes with every religion, it goes with white people, it goes with everyone. Because you cannot generalize and categorize everyone as good or bad, like or dislike, based on a single trait. It's just not fair to them. And reality is, I can honestly say that there's people, all kinds of groups that I like, but there's also ones I dislike. And it's not anything to do with that aspect. It's just, there's more to someone than a single category. And people that make generalizations, and I'm no better. I still make the mistake as well. It's hard not to. When you have a traumatic experience, it's very easy to look for things to improve your judgment and decision making in the future, and taking just a couple things and saying, okay, this is it. And it's not intentional by any means. And when people do this, it doesn't make them bad people. I want to make that perfectly clear. Everyone does this to some extent. Doesn't make it okay or truly justify it all, but it doesn't make you a bad person either. It just is something that we're not always aware of. It's a shield that we create, but sometimes the shield can actually cause more harm than good, or it can cause equal harm as it does good. But the reason I say the whole thing with, some people, I like and dislike certain people within groups, the same thing goes with every generalized group, every stigma-based group. So with addicts, a lot of people understand, or at least have heard, that an addict in recovery, once you're in recovery, you're a better person than when you were in active addiction. You become a better person. But let me be clear on this. Not everyone is a good person. There are some people that were actively using that when they go into recovery, they are still bad people. There's some people that have sustained serious clean time, but they didn't put in the work on themselves. They didn't really care, and they were just bad people. And you can recognize that. They still can be very mean. abusive. That is the kind of behavior, unfortunately, because we tend to remember the negatives over the positives. You can do a great job, make 10 people really, really happy as far as your service for your business. But one person is really dissatisfied. It didn't go well for them. Odds are that one negative person is more likely to talk out on your business and will do more damage than the 10 positive impacts, because people typically don't automatically make associations with the positives. It just doesn't stick. It's no different than if you go into a employment review and your supervisor gives you 10 things you did great, but one thing you need to work on, and you leave thinking of the one thing you need to work on, and that one thing sticks with you. It's the same concept, I believe. You have a bad experience and you click to everyone. And so the negative few are the ones that tend to cause harm to the better remaining, that is often a much larger group. Not all the time, but often that is the case. And so with recovery, you get what you put into it. Not everyone puts the same amount of work into it. Some people are content, or not content, they're complacent. They don't have as big of aspirations as far as change. They are perfectly happy with just staying clean. That's their choice. I think we already talked about last week, content versus complacent. But that has an effect as far as stigmas and public perception. Because when you hear someone has been in recovery for X amount of years, and then you find out that they're abusive, whether it be physically, verbally, sexually, those negative moments hurt an entire community because people make the assumption. Now, this is just one area. A classic example for me where I'm aware of it, though. This is the key thing. I'm aware of it. And when you're aware of something, you can no longer simply claim, well, that's part of my past. It can be part of your past, but when you're aware of it, you now have the ability to start working on it and addressing the issue. So one of the generalizations I have, negative generalizations, that I am fortunate that I can overcome, is certain name associations. I think this is more common than people realize. I know people that won't name their kids after, they go through the list of names for naming their child, and there's a negative association between the two people with so many different names. It's common, but it's hilarious, but it's sad at the same time. But it's also understandable. They don't want to, have any kind of negative thought or image towards their child. But for me, there's two names. So the first one is Jackie, and it stems back to the later years of my grandpa's life. After my grandma had passed away, and my grandpa was rolling in depression, he really needed to get help, but he came from an era where you don't ask for help. That's just not okay in his era. But anyway, he did not know how to handle the situation. He struggled mightily with my grandma's loss, and so a lady named Jackie, of all things, her last name was Daniels. So basically, Jack Daniels, there's the red flag right there, name alone. But anyway, so she ended up getting in a relationship with my grandpa. She was much, much younger. In fact, she was, if I remember correctly, I want to say she was the age of my uncle, so my dad's oldest brother. Maybe she was a little younger. I can't remember, but still. And she drained my grandpa. We called her a gold digger for a reason. And this isn't always the case with that situation. But she drained my grandpa of everything he had. She turned him against our family to the best of her ability. And our family didn't do the greatest job either, hindsight, of handling the situation, because one, it was foreign territory for everyone. But long story short, she drained him of everything. When he had nothing, she was very belittling, very verbally abusive to him, and well, he ended up killing himself. And I'm not going to say it's her fault, because it's not. It's not our fault either. The reality is he was sick. He was struggling with depression. He made the choice, and it's a very unfortunate choice, but it was his to make. With that being said, when I hear someone's name is Jackie, that's instantly the thought that goes into my head. But like I said, I'm aware of it now. When you're aware of it, you can address it mentally in that situation. So I just have to, when I hear that name, I step back and I remind myself, this isn't the same Jackie. This isn't the same person. It has a negative ring instantly in my head, but that isn't fair on the other person. It's wrong. Everyone deserves their own fair chance, in my mind, in my belief, I should say. And so, instead of letting that carry over as an instant negative mark, I have to pause and step back. I will say, in my opinion, at least for me, this is the greatest asset for addressing generalizations, stigmas, stereotypes, is gaining self-awareness. Because you can, when you hear these names, you can step back, you can realize the impact the name alone has, and you can separate the trauma and the negative image from the situation, because that has nothing to do with them. It's not always easy, but it has to be done, in my opinion. The other name, and there's a much creepier, there's a story behind this one, is the name, well, there's a story behind the last one as well, is the name Maddie. So I met someone named Maddie a long time ago now. I basically sang for a group of people while working out west, and she was one of the people that happened to be in the audience, and afterwards she came up and she proposed to me. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She was very, I would say the word clingy, but that's too much of an understatement. It's literally like obsessively stalking, creepy vibe. Anyway, she had nagged me, and it was driving me crazy. There's a lot of other things that happened, and one day she was begging for me to write her song, and I snapped. I stormed out of where I was. I was in the cafeteria, and I was walking back to my room, and my roommate was trying to stop me because he thought that I was going to really go off the deep end. And instead, I sat down at my piano, and I wrote a song called Mad Maddie. If you haven't heard it, you can feel free to check it out. It's the only negative song I've ever written. Coincidentally, a true story. Every word in that song has meaning behind it. But because of this, when I meet someone and their name is Madeline or Maddie, it's an instant connection as far as that thought. And once again, just like Jackie, I had to pull myself back and separate it. And the thing I run into now more than ever with the name Maddie isn't necessarily holding a grudge against them, because I'm pretty good at pulling away on this one. This was a lot easier than the Jackie one. The thought that pops into my head now is, gosh, what are they going to do when they realize I wrote a song called Mad Maddie? That's a hard one to explain to people sometimes. But those are two things that stick out to me, where it's like an instant draw on that. There's interest too, like she was into anime. So like if I hear someone's interested in anime, sometimes it triggers the same thing. Once again, it's a matter of recognizing that, stepping back and going, okay, that's not fair to this person. One interest, one attribute does not define someone. It does not set if they're good or bad. It's just one usually coincidental commonality. So, but it's not just me. So another great example. This is not with my dad. He struggled when he was a kid because he was bullied. Because of that, he, not intentionally, but he associated outgoing personalities and not always just outgoing and joking, with the exception of his closest friends. He associates outgoing and joking as bullies. Because of this, he did not like, unfortunately, he did not like me being naturally meek. He didn't know being me was outgoing and joking naturally. And so when he saw those traits when I was a kid, he associated it with bullies, and the last thing he wanted was his son to be a bully. And there's a lot of good intention behind that. Let me make that clear. It's not like any of that negative association was intentional. And his concern was very much a reasonable concern from his perspective. But he saw it as showing off, and he shunned it. He did not like it. He publicly called me out on it, which was embarrassing, humiliating. Socially, it hurt a lot. But that's not on... That's something he was unaware of, and that's the key part. He was unaware of it. I brought it to his attention. Let's see, it would have been about roughly 2.5 years ago. I brought it up to him, and we talked about it, and he lightly agreed that it could be a possibility, and that I'll take that. And there's no hard feelings between him and I on that. The past is the past, and he's working on it. But that was a classic example of where making an association can cause harm. So here's the other flip side of this. When we make an association or some kind of stigma that's positive, we see something and go, oh, people like that are good. This now has the exact same, or it has the polar opposite effect as far, but same problem, but polar opposite direction. When we associate one thing, if someone has that trait, they're automatically good. There's some people that will share that trait that are not good. And we'll give them too much grace, in my mind, this is my opinion, because of other people that are good. It masks and hides bad intentions and some dangerous people at times. For me, a great example of this is political affiliation. I'm not going to talk about my exact political affiliation, but it's very easy for me to make, when I hear someone's political view, to see them as, if it's lines with mine, it's easy to say, oh, they're a good person. But I have met people that have similar political views as me that are not good people. It kind of makes me scratch my head sometimes on how they believe politically some of the things I believe, but their actions and behavior do not always match that. Sometimes there's a bit of inconsistency with their views, with their actions. But it's a classic example. You give them a benefit of the doubt, which I think it's healthy in my mind to give people the benefit of the doubt to start out anyway, but you sometimes give them too much of a benefit on that. I do, at least. And so that's something I have to work on the positive association. And I can say that I have gotten drastically better at handling this. I got much better at handling being on the other end of generalizations and stigmas and stereotypes. And it's been an issue, really, the last 6 months, it's really become a much larger issue. I've dealt with it now professionally. I've had several employers that have offered me positions to go alongside with Big Andy Media, not tied in with Big Andy Media at all. They're just additional for the, additional stable income. Where I'd interviewed for the position, I was offered the positions, and they rescinded the positions. They offered me the positions based on my resume, based on how they felt that I had the personality, the qualifications, but behind the scenes, when it came to the simple paper with HR, and then they pulled up my past, which I've always so far been honest about my past. I tell them that I struggle with active addiction. I tell them this usually, if it's not in the application, I at least say it in the interview. I tell them that I've made poor choices in the past. Some of those poor choices led to legal issues. And those legal issues involved retail fraud, felony retail fraud, actually frauds with an S, in a very, very short period of time. I've made that clear so far in all these, and the hiring managers have always appreciated the transparency. They continually give me an offer contingent on background check. And so then it goes to HR or whatever, and they rescind it. And some of these jobs I'm surprised had been rescinded. I'm surprised that they're holding that I guess that would be a stigma against people that have either that people have been in legal trouble, incarcerated, or people that have struggled with addiction that have made poor decisions. One of those, I'm not going to name the organization, but one of them was a nonprofit organization in the area, and I was in the running for a position for a peer support specialist, which, if those who don't know, it's for people that have experience with mental health diagnosis, as well as often with addiction. And so when you say you've have a multiple first-degree retail fraud convictions, it's one of the few times where that's actually usually a plus, not a plus, but it's a positive for that position, because it's something people can relate with, as far as you can relate with someone who you might be speaking with. Apparently, they had a rule against that as well, which was a bit shocking. They had a rule saying 10 years from the date of the conviction for retail frauds, even though I mentioned it in all 3 interviews. And it was actually brought up in a positive manner in that 3rd interview. But anyway, that's an example of professionally. And that's a stigma that our country holds a lot, with people that have faced legal challenges. We have a society that loves to really hit on that. And some of it's understandable. There's people that faced legal challenges, and they come out and they're just going through the motions, and they really haven't done much. There's really not a whole lot, as far as, if you go simply based on time, it's hard to give a fair assessment. There's some people that can go 10 years without a crime, and they're still just waiting for the opportunity. There's people that have gone a year since the crime, and they're just looking for a second chance. I am on the second chance one, but I do understand the struggles with that with people. I don't hold it against these employers. It's frustrating. It's a system, a society thing that I struggle with, but it's a reminder too. The other one would be under the personal one. I've had friends, at one time friends, that have pulled away since finding out that I struggled with addiction. Not many. Most of them have been very supportive, and I am very blessed for that. But there have been some. They just didn't feel comfortable anymore with association. There's been times in the past, not too long of past either, fairly recent, where it's even been an issue with dating and relationships, that kind of relationships. Someone had a traumatic situation with their past with someone who struggled with addiction, was struggling with addiction, and so unfortunately they associated the trauma they had with that person, they associated it with addiction. And like I said, I don't hold it against this person or any other of the people. It's unfortunate that they had to go through the trauma, and it's also unfortunate that they associate that trauma with a singular couple issues. I tend to be open about my addiction with everyone. The good, the bad, it's just, I like to be transparent, I like to be open, honest. Some people are okay with it. Some people are willing to work through it. Some people are willing to at least give time, give a chance. And I appreciate that, but some people aren't. And I'm okay with that as well. That's their choice. It's not everyone is ready. That's okay. That's just where they're at. They might never be ready. And once again, that's out of my control. That's where they're at. The way I've handled being on the negative end, like I said, awareness and self-awareness. I'm aware that I cannot control their actions. I'm aware the stigmas exist to begin with. And instead of dwelling on it, well, there's things I can do, right? So right now I make a conscious effort on focusing on what I can control. The most recent thing on professional is I had a marketing position, 2 of them in the last month, but the most recent one was on this earlier this week. On Tuesday, I had my marketing position rescinded. In that moment, I focus on what can I control, right? I can't change their mind on this. This is something they've already made up, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to use my time. I'm going to use it when we spend more time on Big Andy Media. I'm going to do more brainstorming to find out the most efficient path on this without jeopardizing my values or my ambition. I can deal with, my attitude has helped me a lot on this. It's easy to dwell and feel the self-pity. And it does happen at first. When you get this news initially, it does hurt. It does hit. And I stopped fighting that, because if you don't feel, in my personal opinion and what I've observed and heard from others, if you aren't willing to feel both the good and the bad, then you can't learn from it as well. You can't grow from it. And you suffer when you fight. When you resist it, when you try avoiding it, that's what leads to suffering. And so I take the moment, I feel it. I have that brief moment of grief, and then I put it into perspective. It's a numbers thing. Eventually, the right person comes along in relationships. Eventually, the right opportunity will come around for that second chance as far as the additional part-time positions. And if that one doesn't come around, Big Andy Media is finally getting some ground under it, so I am not horribly worried. I will find a way with freelancing to get by in the meantime if that is the scenario. But things will be okay. That's ultimately what it is. It's hard to deal with sometimes, but things will be okay. It can be frustrating. I get it. It's really frustrating. But I don't give up hope on it. I don't let the past, I don't let the stigmas and the generalizations, the stereotypes, all these things, I don't let it define me. I don't start listening to the negatives that come from it. Because if I start listening to it, if I give that negativity life, then I am giving those words, those beliefs, I'm giving them power, which then takes the hope and shifts it to shame. And the best way to destroy hope is going to shame. It is a very, very toxic, dangerous thing, shame is, which I've addressed recently. So instead of focusing on those things and feeling sorry for myself or giving up, I accept that everything happens for a reason. I focus on what I can control. I can continue to work on myself. I when I'm frustrated, whether it be professionally or personally, I can keep on working. And that's how I get through. So my basic, to summarize with generalizations, stigmas, stereotypes, and generalizations. They're out there. We can acknowledge that. We all, to some extent, struggle with making generalizations in some way, shape, or form. And we have all been I'm not going to say victim, I'm going to say we've all been on the receiving end. We've been the recipient of various stigmas, stereotypes, and generalizations. But those are things we can work on improving if we're willing to put in the work, if we're willing to. I'll go with that with addiction real quick. As I mentioned, some people don't put in the work, they don't put in the effort. And so people see that and they make the association, right? But people can change. We have the ability to change. So someone can have a troubling past, but they can change. If, this key thing, if they are willing to change, and if they are willing to put in the work and consistent effort to do so. Not everyone will. A lot of people will not put in the work to change if they have a trait that you've seen as negative. But don't let those people set the tone, set the precedence for others. Separate them and learn to see it as that is them. That is not everyone. That's today's episode. I know I went long today, and last time I said I was trying to keep it under 20 minutes, and I just went to 35. But I appreciate you sticking around if you did to listen to this. So have a great weekend. and I'll leave you with the closer now. Take care. Andy's Chomping at the Bit is brought to you by Big Andy Media.